I was originally going to make this as a two-part review with Cyberdimension, but for the sake of structure, it's a second video. Now, every main Neptunia game has a remake, and V2's remake isn't labeled Rebirth 4, but V2R. I won't mention the story because the story is the exact same as the original V2. And I'm not here to review the story, but to point out differences between the two in gameplay. Obviously, the biggest addition to the game is the new VR segments. In these are events sprinkled through the game with Neptune, Noir, Blonde, Best Girl, and Neptune, now that's not a mistake, as they interact with you, the player. As originally, Adult Neptune opens up the VR dimension. Hey there, Pcuspard Review Edition is here! So, I realized this after I began editing this video, but the game doesn't start with Adult Neptune, but it does start with Quar and Histoire discussing the situation of the VR dimension. Not only that, but V2R isn't just a remake of V2. It's also technically a sequel. This is done as the main game of V2R being a retelling of the original V2 as a separate game. Okay, back to the present nerd. And later as the game goes on, you unlock more events and become known by them as the hero who helped them achieve victory. This is super meta. And clearly, you guys know who my personal favorite choice is. Turn on the lights in here, baby. Extra bright, I want to see this. I neglected to mention this both in my old V2 review and in my Cyberdimension review. The voice actresses for Vert and Noir were replaced in those respective games. Vert is now voiced by Kari Karanen, originally known for her role as Mami Tomoe, as well as the voice actress behind ROM since Mach 2. Noir from Cyberdimension onwards is voiced by Erica Mendez, who is known for voicing other black-haired twin tail characters, such as Maki Harukawa from Danganronpa, as well as Nico Yazawa from Love Live. These two fit their roles comfortably, so much that at points I had a hard time noticing they were the new cast instead of the previous cast. Though at points when I listen to Vert, I can't help but think, when did Mommy change her main color? Getting back to the VR segments, as I mentioned before, you don't need to have the VR headset to see these events. You can easily go through them with a controller. Which is honestly the better move, considering why would you buy a $60 game with a $200 headset just to view about 50 cutscenes with a waifu? I just answered my own question. As for the gameplay, who here remembers AP or action points from Mach 2? No one? Anybody? Well, it's back. Every action you make, whether you want to heal, attack, defend, it'll require you to shortly go to a specific menu. These were in the original Neptunia as well, and sort of served the same purpose. It was to allow you to perform more than one action during your turn. This was sort of done away with in Victory, and at most the spirit of it was continued in a sense through making combos in that and OGV2. However, it was seen in a different form in Superdimension vs. Sega Hard Girls, except instead of AP, which gets refilled after the enemy's turn, it was the fever gauge. As such, while the gameplay does feel a bit sluggish at points, like Superdimension, it is far from the absolute slug that was the original Neptunia. As for other attributes aside from the gameplay, dungeon crawling. In dungeons, instead of just controlling the party leader, the other 4 other party members follow behind you, though the AI is a significant improvement over Cyberdimensions. Also within the dungeons, like Superdimension, you are able to sprint. However, it's not nearly as large of a change, as it functions a lot like the sprint in Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild, where you have a stamina gauge in order to give a sense of how long you can sprint. However, having the sprint in this game makes much more sense than in Superdimension. Not that it wasn't welcome. What I'm getting at is, the dungeons in MegaDimension, V2 or V2R, are huge. Like, really hecking huge. Having the sprint allows players to get through dungeons faster, to keep investment. That and also the graphics look more crisp. Like, V2 doesn't look bad, not in the slightest. However, in V2R, the characters pop. There's much more vibrance to the models than before. Another change is that for various skills in V2, such as the Tribursts of Neptune, VIIR, and Uzume, now have their own cinematics rather than just explosions. Some parts were taken out as well, namely some of the voice acting in some scenes. I question why some of these weren't just reused for this, namely Uni's famous "Freeze, bitch!" I could never understand why the line was taken out of the game. This is because all 3 characters in the scene, Neptunia, Uni, and Uzume, never had their voice actors changed out. Obviously this isn't a problem of maximum proportions, but it's something that really confused me. Other nitpicks I have are the opening. The opening to V2R is not bad in the slightest. Hell, I have plans for that in the future. But what I'm not exactly for in this intro is the tone. The happy tone is much more attributed to the VR segments, which is fine. However, my nitpick with it is, most of the game isn't the VR segments. Most of the game is a remake of V2, whose main opening completely worked with the tone of the game. Most of the time, Neptunia intros go really well with the tone for the majority of the game. Even my least favorites, the OG Neptunia and Hyper Devotion Noir, did this well, as OG Neptunia's tone was much darker, and Hyper Devotion's was about Noir opening up, ready to fix the mistakes she made. I may seem like the kind of Neptunia fan who enjoys every little thing Idea Factory and Compile Heart love feeding me, but screw it, that's kinda true. If you haven't already played the original V2, then I can easily recommend V2R, as there's a lot more content, there's more to do, and there are more additions. Though this doesn't make the original V2 obsolete in my eyes. As while V2R has more content and the return of the old AP mechanic, V2 has more dialogue, or as Let's Player Noble called it, budget, as well as the refinement of the battle system of the Rebirth trilogy. If you already own V2 though, and have beaten it, then my advice would be to wait a while if you want to play it. Sure, the battle system is different, you can sprint, and the VR segments are well animated with good voice acting and voice direction, but for the most part, it's still an upscaled V2. You can't go wrong choosing either.